At its peak, the Roman Empire was a force unlike any the world had ever seen. It spanned continents, stretching from the misty highlands of Britain to the sands of North Africa. From the mighty Rhine River to the ancient cities of the Middle East, Rome wasn't just a city, it was an idea, a symbol of unmatched power, wealth, discipline, and innovation. The rise of Rome was not an accident, but a calculated climb through strategic military conquests, political genius, and societal structure that for centuries seemed invincible. The empire wasn't built in a day, and neither was its power. It came from centuries of expansion, evolving from a small republic into a colossal dominion under the control of powerful emperors. And for a time, it truly seemed like Rome would last forever. The Roman military machinery was at the heart of its rise. Roman legions were well-trained, disciplined, and organized to a level unmatched by any rival of their time. They didn't just conquer, they established order. Roads were built, cities were founded, and Roman law and language followed wherever the army went. Latin, Roman engineering, and their efficient governance spread across the known world. Every corner of the empire felt Rome's presence. You could travel from Hispania to Judea and still see Roman statues, wear Roman garments, use Roman coins. The empire became the first version of globalization, connecting diverse cultures under one central rule. Their economy boomed as trade routes flowed across the Mediterranean, bringing exotic goods, wealth, and culture into the heart of the empire. Aqueducts carried clean water across vast distances. Amphitheaters echoed with cheers. Markets overflowed with spices, silk, and stories from distant lands. It was a golden age for art, philosophy, and architecture. The Colosseum stood as a monument, not just to entertainment, but to Roman engineering brilliance. The Pantheon and Roman roads still impress modern architects today. But perhaps the most impressive feat was the sheer ability of the Roman government to integrate the conquered. They allowed local customs to exist under the broader Roman umbrella, often absorbing the religions, gods, and practices of the people they overtook. This inclusive policy helped avoid large-scale rebellion, giving Rome a semblance of unity despite its immense diversity. Rome's rise was also a result of strong leadership, at least in the early days. Figures like Julius, Caesar, Augustus, and Trajan combined military genius with political savvy. Augustus, in particular, established the Principate, a political system that gave him near-total control, while preserving the illusion of the Roman Republic. This illusion kept senators and citizens satisfied, even as the emperor held absolute power. Roman culture flourished in this time. Literature, science, and philosophy from both Greek and Roman thinkers shaped the minds of the empire. Education and intellectual pursuits were encouraged. Citizenship was seen as an honor, something to be earned, not given. And that citizenship came with real benefits, legal protection, economic opportunity, and status. But as glorious and powerful as Rome became, the seeds of its fall were already quietly taking root beneath the surface. In its success lay its greatest vulnerability. The empire grew so large, so complex, that even its unmatched system began to strain. Its military, once fiercely loyal and native to Roman soil, began to rely on mercenaries from outside. Its government, once guided by ambition and wisdom, began to crumble under corruption and ambition. The more Rome expanded, the more difficult it became to hold everything together. But that story is still to come. In this chapter, we've explored how Rome rose from the dust of a republic into the shining titan of the ancient world. It wasn't luck, it was power, planning, and innovation. But as history has shown us time and time again, even the mightiest empires can fall, and when they do, the crash is heard for centuries. As the mighty Roman Empire reached the height of its power, what no one could see at the time was that its very foundations were beginning to crack. From the outside, Rome looked invincible. Its legions still marched across continents, its monuments towered over cities, and its influence extended from deserts to mountains. But inside, the empire was rotting. The seeds of destruction were not planted by enemies at the gates, but by the hands of those who claimed to protect it. Internal corruption and political instability became the silent assassins of Rome. The Roman political system, once a complex balance of senate, consuls, and emperors, slowly dissolved into chaos. Power became a game of survival, a brutal contest, where assassination, bribery, and betrayal replaced loyalty, honor, and governance. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed. Some ruled for only months, others for mere days before being murdered or overthrown. This constant power shift created a sense of instability that spread like a disease through the empire. The once proud Senate became a puppet, easily manipulated or ignored by the next tyrant to seize the throne. Loyalty was not earned, it was bought. And as greed replaced virtue, the heart of Rome grew weaker. One of the greatest weaknesses of the late Roman Empire was the degradation of leadership. The golden age of wise and capable emperors gave way to a line of rulers who were often more concerned with personal luxury, vanity, or survival than with the stability of the empire. Some drained the empire's coffers to fund extravagant lifestyles. Others persecuted rivals, tortured political enemies, or sold positions of power to the highest bidder. The moral compass of Rome was spinning wildly, and the citizens could feel it. Meanwhile, economic troubles were mounting. The empire had expanded so much that it became increasingly expensive to maintain. Roads, borders, cities required funds, and the empire began to run out of money. In a desperate attempt to keep up, the government resorted to overtaxation. Heavy taxes crushed farmers, merchants, and citizens alike, driving many into poverty or rebellion. Inflation skyrocketed as coinage was debased with cheaper metals, and confidence in the Roman economy began to collapse. Trade declined, agricultural output diminished, and urban centers decayed. Another ticking time bomb was the reliance on slavery. For centuries, Roman wealth had been built on the backs of slaves, captives from conquered lands who worked the farms, built the roads, and served in the homes of the wealthy. But as Rome's expansion slowed, the flow of new slaves dried up. The entire economy began to suffer. Rome had built a machine that could not run without conquest, and, when the conquering stopped, so did the engine of its economy. That once mighty legions, the backbone of Roman dominance, were also changing. No longer made up of proud Roman citizens, many legions were filled with mercenaries and foreign soldiers who had little loyalty to the empire. Discipline eroded. Soldiers began to serve for money rather than for Rome. And when pay was delayed, or promises broken, these troops often turned on their own commanders or joined enemies for better rewards. Without a loyal and disciplined military, the empire's defenses weakened dramatically. Civic pride among the Roman people also waned. Citizens no longer believed in the Roman ideal as they once had. Life in the empire had become harder, more unstable, and less promise. While the empire still looked strong from a distance, the cracks in its armor were deepening. Political chaos, economic collapse, moral decay, and military dysfunction were forming a perfect storm. The enemies outside hadn't even begun their final assault, and already Rome was struggling to stand. The fall of an empire doesn't happen overnight. It begins with the erosion of trust, the collapse of systems, and the decay of values. Rome had all the signs, it just didn't want to see them. And in the next chapter, we'll see how external pressures finally pushed this unstable giant to its knees. As Rome crumbled from within, the world beyond its borders was shifting in dangerous and unpredictable ways, while internal corruption and political decay weakened the empire's core. External forces were gathering strength, ready to strike. The once impenetrable borders of the Roman Empire, which had held back invaders for centuries, were now more vulnerable than ever. And as those borders began to falter, waves of invaders, refugees, and warrior tribes surged forward, forever altering the destiny of Rome. Among the most significant and fearsome were the Germanic tribes. For generations, they had lived just beyond Rome's frontier, watching, learning, and occasionally clashing with the empire. At first, Rome had been able to repel or even recruit some of these tribes into its military. But as Rome's strength faded, the balance of power began to shift. In 376 AD, a pivotal moment arrived. The Visigoths, fleeing the terrifying advance of the Huns from the east, sought refuge within Roman territory. Instead of compassion, they were met with exploitation and abuse by Roman officials. What followed was a catastrophic rebellion. In 378 AD, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Roman army suffered a devastating defeat at the hands of the Visigoths. The Emperor Valens was killed, and the loss shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. It was the first time in centuries that a Roman emperor had died in battle against a foreign enemy. And the psychological blow was immense. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a sign that Rome's enemies were no longer in the shadows. They were at the gates. The most symbolic and shocking moment came in 410 AD, when the Visigoth king, Alaric, led his forces into the heart of the empire and sacked Rome. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City, once the center of the civilized world, was overrun by outsiders. Citizens were slaughtered, treasures looted, and the Roman aura of invincibility shattered forever. The sack of Rome sent shockwaves across the known world. If Rome could fall, was anything truly safe? But the Visigoths were just the beginning. The Vandals followed, sweeping through Spain and eventually crossing into North Africa, cutting off one of Rome's most vital sources of grain and wealth. In 455 AD, the Vandals did what their name suggests. They returned to Rome and looted it once again, this time even more thoroughly than the Visigoths. The empire was now facing threats from every direction. The Franks, the Saxons, the Alemanni, the Burgundians, all of them were carving out pieces of the empire for themselves. And behind many of these movements stood a new and terrifying force. The Huns, fierce and fast, led by their infamous leader, Attila. The Huns struck terror into the hearts of both Romans and Germanic tribes alike. They moved like lightning across the land, devastating everything in their path. Although they never fully conquered Rome, their presence destabilized the region and pushed other tribes further into Roman territory, fueling the chaos. Rome was not just losing battles, it was losing entire provinces, entire regions, entire ways of life. Even Rome's strategy of dividing the empire into eastern and western halves, intended to make management easier, contributed to its downfall. The Eastern Roman Empire, based in Constantinople, had stronger defenses, wealthier cities, and more effective leadership. It gradually distanced itself from the struggling West, which was left to fend off invaders alone. Resources were stretched thin, and alliances crumbled. The once mighty Western Roman Empire became a shell of its former self, overrun, overtaxed, and overwhelmed. The boy emperor was just a teenager, and his fall marked the symbolic end of the Western Roman Empire. It didn't fall in a blaze of glory, it quietly collapsed, overtaken not by a single enemy but by a tidal wave of pressure from within and without. The fall of Rome wasn't one battle or one event, it was a slow-motion collapse under the weight of its own arrogance, corruption, and the rising strength of those it once dismissed as barbarians. These so-called savages would go on to shape the future of Europe, founding kingdoms and forging a new era from the ruins of an empire that once believed it would last forever. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD was not just the end of an era, it was the beginning of something entirely new. Though its power faded and its territories were overtaken, the legacy of Rome refused to die. In fact, in many ways, Rome never truly fell. Its spirit, its systems, and its influence lived on, woven into the very fabric of modern civilization. To understand the real impact of Rome, we need to look not just at how it ended, but at what it left behind. The collapse of Rome set the stage for the Middle Ages, a time of transformation, chaos, and rebirth. Out of the ashes of the empire, new kingdoms emerged, ruled not by emperors in togas, but by kings in armor. These new leaders, many of them once considered enemies of Rome, adopted Roman customs, language, and laws. The Visigoths in Spain, the Franks in Gaul, the Ostrogoths in Italy, they didn't destroy Rome's legacy. They inherited it. The Latin language, once spoken in every corner of the empire, evolved into the Romance languages we know today's French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Roman law became the foundation for legal systems that are still in use across the world. Even the concept of a republic, a government by the people, would resurface centuries later and inspire revolutions in America, France, and beyond. Rome's ideas outlived its monuments. Architecturally, Rome left behind marvels that still stand today. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, Roman roads, aqueducts, and temples, these weren't just buildings. They were blueprints. Modern engineering owes much to the ingenuity of Roman architects, who built not just for the present, but for eternity. Their arches, domes, and concrete mixtures were far ahead of their time. Walk through any major city in Europe, and you'll see traces of Rome in the layout of streets, in the ruins quietly tucked between glass skyscrapers, and in the language etched into stone. Culturally, Rome was a bridge between ancient traditions and the modern world. The Roman calendar, with some adjustments, is the one we still use today. The concept of citizenship, civic duty, and public service, that too comes from Rome. The Senate, political campaigning, even the idea of checks and balances, all were part of a system that, despite its flaws, laid the groundwork for democracy as we know it. The fall of the empire also transformed religion in Europe forever. Christianity, once a persecuted faith within the empire, had become the official religion by the time of Rome's decline. As the empire crumbled, the Church rose. The Roman Catholic Church preserved not just faith, but knowledge, copying manuscripts, teaching Latin, maintaining some form of structure through centuries of upheaval. In many ways, the Church became the new Rome, carrying its torch through the darkness of the Middle Ages. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the Roman Empire is the lesson it teaches. Rome was not the first great civilization to fall, nor would it be the last. Its story is a warning about the dangers of complacency, corruption, and arrogance. It reminds us that no matter how powerful a nation becomes, it is never immune to collapse. But it's also a story of resilience. Out of its fall came rebirth. Out of its ruins came renewal. Humanity didn't end when Rome did, it evolved. The world we live in today is built on Rome's bones. From the architecture we admire, to the legal rights we defend, from the roads we travel, to the languages we speak, the shadow of Rome stretches far and wide. It's not just history, it's heritage. And that's why the story of Rome still captivates us, because deep down, we see a reflection of ourselves, our potential, our flaws, and our future. So as we close this final chapter on the fall of the Roman Empire, remember, this isn't just a story of what was lost, it's a story of what was passed on. And it's up to us to learn from it, to build from it, and to ensure that what we create today doesn't fall tomorrow. If you've enjoyed uncovering the secrets and legacy of ancient Rome, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who love to explore the forgotten pages of history. There's so much more to discover, and together, we'll bring the past back to life.